Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Tonight we are going to make some yummy steak bites. We're going to cook up some rice, bake up a focaccia, and have some asparagus. And we're going to make a Parmesan cream sauce to drizzle over everything to make it even more delicious because sauces make everything better. So we've got 2 cups of rice here. This is jasmine rice. We are going to rinse it and then we'll start cooking it off for it. But this is what we're going to serve our steak bites on with a little drizzle of our Parmesan cream sauce and then our asparagus. So we'll all come together. You just want to rinse it, get any of that white kind of powdery stuff off. There we go. This is going to allow it to cook up much nicer. Okay. So I've got 3 cups of water for my 2 cups of rice. Add this in here. And then I'll turn it on high. Once it comes to a boil, we'll bring it down low and cover it with a lid. Let me grab a spoon here. And we'll give this a little bit of a stir. But our rice is going to be the longest thing that essentially needs to cook here. So we want to get it going first. Gotta give it a good stir because you don't want any of it to stick to the bottom of the pan.
I have a question. Do you have a chicken tetrazzini recipe?
Oh, I don't know if I've cooked chicken tetrazzini before, but I don't think I have done it yet on camera. So that might be a challenge that I might have to do on there. I love cooking Italian food, so I'll have to do it because I haven't done it. I've done a lot of of them, but I don't think I've done that one yet.
Well, if you're taking challenges, I challenge you to lemon tarts.
Oh, always to lemon tarts. Okay, I have my sourdough prepped up for a focaccia. This is a true sourdough one, so no yeast to add it in there. I prepped this up earlier today, and it's been proofing. And turn off my oven now. So we're gonna drizzle this over with some olive oil, and then we're gonna put our herbs on it. But before I drizzle and do all of that, let me kind of prep up my herbs so that I don't have to wash my hands 10 times between it. We're going to use some green onions, some thyme and rosemary, as well as garlic, salt, and a little black pepper. So I'm going to just grab a couple sprigs of our thyme. And you could do oregano, basil, so many different flavors. Focaccia is like a blank canvas. You can also decorate it and make it really bougie and pretty if you want to, or keep it simple by just throwing everything on it. So I'm going to take off the leaves because I don't want my stems on there. Here we go. But this will just add just some nice, really fun bursts of flavor in here that's actually a little bit more delicate than dried on there. Here, let's get all of these little leaves. I always say thyme is the one that's never as fun to take off. It doesn't come off as easily as like oregano or rosemary. So we'll do our little work, our due diligence here. And then I have rosemary, which will come off the stem really easily. Although if you wanted to, I know to make things like really pretty, you could like put the full twig on there, but it's not practical when eating if you have the full twig on it because you bite up and you've got a branch in your mouth. So we're going to take off all the leaves. That way we have just the flavors for it.
I have a question. Do you feel like any soups can have good flavor without using bouillon?
Yes, I would say you can definitely get some good flavor out of soups like that are more of like a vegetable puree soup. So like a tomato basil soup. I feel like you can definitely season that up with just using salt instead of like a chicken broth or a vegetable broth, because essentially the tomatoes have a natural base broth inside them. And then fresh basil, garlic, butter. Yeah, you could definitely use it without that. But for like a broth based soup, I mean, you can make your own using like chicken and the actual to season it up. But outside of like a bisque type thing, not really. Okay, let's get these minced up. And just to make them a little bit smaller on the thyme, I will just going to kind of take off the bottom bits of my rosemary so that they'll flake out a little bit better instead of having like a fan of herbs. Here we go. And then we're going to just put these over it. Now, I also really love dried herbs on my focaccia. I think it's delicious too. So you don't have to use just fresh herbs. I think dry work out really well too. Okay. Now we're going to have our fun where we're going to just kind of sprinkle it on here. There we go. And before I put the rest on, I totally realized I forgot to do the fun part about this, which won't matter with the rosemary. We're going to put a little bit of olive oil over the top. I'm going to get my fingers in it. We're going to kind of spread it first. And I like to do the dimpling part typically before I do my herbs. Now we're just going to go in with our fingers and create our little dimples. This is going to give you lots of nice, really crispy edges when it bakes up. And when I put the sourdough in here, I used olive oil and coated the bottom of it so that you'll have this really nice kind of base of crispy, crunchy base at the bottom. Now let's get some of that off. Now, as much as I love parchment paper and baking with parchment paper, with focaccia, I like to bake it on the metal pan. I feel like it gives it an even more of a crunch to it, where I feel like with parchment paper, the steam can kind of get trapped in there and can give you more of a chewy, but less of a crispy crunch edge to it. Now we're going to put our thyme that we minced up. Here we go. Sprinkling it all over. And I just try to get it as evenly spread out as possible. And then I have some green onions that we're going to slice up and throw on there. And then our finishing, we're going to do garlic salt and black pepper. So kind of keeping that part simple for it. But I love garlic salt on it because it gives you that kind of garlic bread to it. And black pepper is amazing on it. I just really love black pepper and sourdough. I feel like it kind of cuts through sometimes that tartness of sourdough, and it just is lovely. Okay. So now we've got our green onions. We're going to sprinkle this over as well.
You have a question? Is this sourdough?
This is a sourdough focaccia, yes. So this is 100% with the starter, no added yeast to help it. Although you can make plenty of focaccias with yeast. I actually have a couple that are straight up yeast and hybrids, which are a mix between yeast and like the discard. They all have like gives you different like variations in how quick. If you want to do a sourdough one, you have to start it really early in the day or the night before. So it's not one that you can just, oh, I need to do this now. It takes longer. But yeast you can do a little bit quicker. Okay, we're going to sprinkle our garlic salt over the top. A nice, good, even kind of sprinkle. And then before we do our black pepper, I'm going to give my rice a little bit of a stir. Stir it kind of frequently until we put our lid on so that we don't have any of it stick or burn to the bottom of our pan. And then now let me grab my pepper. And we're going to sprinkle a little bit of this pepper over. And this is lovely. Here we go. And you want to have it where you get a good sprinkle in every bite. Now, if you can take this kick of pepper more, do freshly ground pepper. It's got more flavor, is much stronger than already ground one. I sometimes think freshly ground is too spicy. That's how much of a spice wimp I am, but it is lovely at times. But if you like more mellow, more mild, where your kids are going to like it a little better, do already ground. It's kind of mellowed out some. This is going to go into our oven at 425, and we're going to have it bake for about 25 minutes, and that should give it a nice kind of golden but crispy edge to it. And our goal is to have everything else done, hopefully by then. Okay, So once our rice, we're waiting on that to bring there. I'm going to turn it up just a smidge, and we can start prepping our, before we cut up our meat, let's start prepping our garlic, because we're going to kind of infuse some butter first before we saute off our meat in there, so that it'll have just some lovely flavors. Let me grab my, so I'm going to get, part of this butter is going to go for later, when we make our kind of Parmesan cream sauce or butter sauce that will drizzle over thing. That's going to be like the thing that adds some great flavor to your rice.
For those thinking about starting the sourdough process, which starter do you suggest?
So I make my own starter, and I do have a recipe card available for everybody on how they can create their own starter, as well as a series of videos that take about 5 minutes every single day to make your very own starter. I find that making your own starter is really, really easy, as long as you make sure you buy like unbleached flour and have, you know, a jar and everything like that. It's really simple, and I've been really successful with making it on my own. I've never actually bought a starter to use. I've just made mine all at home. So I do have those all available on the link on our page, just to kind of search for it, as well as that recipe card and a whole tutorial video on how you can create your very first sourdough loaf, from like the stretches and the folds to the proofing and the weighting and stuff like that. It's not a hard process. It's a process that's spread out over a day. But every step of it is really easy. But if you don't know the terminology and don't know what it means, that can be tricky. That's why I made those really detailed videos, because I remember when I first started my journey, I was like, what, you don't need it? No, you do something different. You do stretch and folds because it's a high hydration dough. So there's just some different terminology in there if you don't know that. So you check out those videos and they'll kind of walk you through it, as well as how to feed your starter, and when to discard and everything. But I will say I really love my sour. I'm so glad I went on my sourdough journey. And my mom always says, she goes, that was like the best thing you ever did, was starting to make sourdough bread. And you know, that's one of those things, like with a yeast bread, you can wake up and you can say, hey, I'm going to make bread today. But with a sourdough, if you don't have a starter, it's going to be about a week or so before you can have your first loaf of bread. But it is well worth it. Okay, we're going to mince up. I've got about, I want to say, a good amount of garlic here, although I'm not going to use it all right now. I'm just going to mince it up. But this is about 2 tablespoons of garlic. We're going to use half right now to infuse into the butter, and the other part is going to go into our sauce. So you're going to get really good garlic notes in this dish. So if you need to ward off any vampires.
Yeah, question. Can you use garlic for this recipe?
You could definitely use garlic. You know, I know a lot of people love to hate on garlic. I love it. I think it's a great thing to do. If you want to save the time, you don't want to peel it up. There are some differences from it. And so like fresh garlic, of course, has a kind of a nice level flavor, but garlic is amazing. I typically use garlic whenever it's not like a main piece in my dish. If it's a sidekick in there, it's always garlic. I don't take the time to mince it up. But if it is something this is a strong note, I'm using fresh, because I think it will make it taste, you know, slightly better, because it's going to be a star ingredient. But garlic is always welcome. I'd rather take that over nothing. Okay, let's get this. I'm going to have my pan down pretty low right now because I want it to infuse just right around a 4. So we'll kind of bring these flavors into the garlic, toast it up, and this is what we're going to kind of cook our steak bites in. And then we're going to use this same pan with the tasty drippings from the steak to make our sauce. And I will say, the smell of garlic is always just wonderful. Give our rice, again, I always say, until you've got that first boil on it, just stir frequently. If you don't, then that's when you're going to get kind of it stuck to the bottom of your pan. Okay, I'm going to do a little side over here, and let's get our steak cut up.
What's the best way to make sure your garlic doesn't burn?
Lower temperature. Go slower and lower. It on high temperatures, it will crisp up and burn really, really fast. So that's why I have mine on a nice slow one, and keep your eye on it, because if you're doing a medium or even a medium high, your garlic will burn in less than a minute. Because it's so small, it toasts up really, really quick. So I go low and slow, and then just making sure it's nice and like hot. Like when I'm putting my meat in, I'll turn it up a little bit because it's going to bring it down, but I keep it over that medium and prevent it from getting too hot. Okay, I'm going to cube up. This is a top sirloin steak. So not always like, it's a tender enough cut, but not necessarily like the greatest singular cut of meat that I would just serve up on its own. But with steak bites and a Parmesan like sauce, I feel like that just works really well together. So I'm going to just start, and then we're going to kind of cube it. I am going to leave the fat on this so that it kind of toasts up and cooks there. You can always, I feel like that's a personal preference, whether you like the fat on steak or not. If you don't like it, cut it off. If you like it, you can keep it on. It does give you a little bit more flavor and tenderness on there. And this is it was like almost 2¼ pounds. So we're going to start right here, but let's take a pause real quick. I'm going to wash my hands, and then we'll get our rice real quick. So it's got a nice boil, so I'm going to stir it, and then we're going to turn it all the way down to low. Just make sure you do a really good stir. And you always need to make sure it comes to a nice boil. And then what I like to do is I have it on low, but I take it and I move it slightly off my burner so it gets even less direct heat. And then we're going to put our lid on. But you see how it's half of it's off and it's on the lowest setting. This is going to allow it to still get heat, but even lower. And I find that really just makes it like perfect.
What kind of meat is that?
This is a top sirloin. So it's a kind of really delicious but tender, but not necessarily one that's great as a standalone steak. It's better with like a little sauce or seasoned up like steak bites. Okay, so we've got our garlic in here. It's got nice browning on it. So we're going to pop in our steak bites here in just a second. There we go. So I'm just going to go through and I'm going to cube this off, and then we're going to season it just a little bit. Really simple seasoning because we're going to have our great sauce that's going to add flavor. Here. And I'm just aiming for a good, little square here. I don't want it too small because if you cut them too small, you're going to cook through it pretty fast, and then you'll have tougher pieces of meat. I want them to cook up pretty quickly with nice kind of medium rare in the middle. Beautiful. Looks like our garlic is getting there perfectly. Again, you want to always watch it. So on there, I'm going to turn it down just a little bit lower. Once you add your next set of meat in, or your meat in there, your garlic will stop cooking as much. We're going to do a little drizzle of Worcestershire. I don't want too much because I want to keep it kind of dry, but I want a little bit of it on there. We're going to do a little bit of onion powder. This is going to help kind of keep it more dry so it gets a really good sear on it. We'll probably use about a tablespoon all together. Let me grab. And then we're going to do garlic salt. So more and more. And then black pepper. A good little shake over. Before we put this in here, whenever I cook steak, I don't always do it with just butter. I'm going to do butter and a little bit of olive oil. That olive oil will allow me to heat our butter up just a slightly higher temperature without worrying about those milk solids necessarily burning. It just kind of keeps it nice. So we're going to turn this now up to about a medium heat, and then we'll pop this steak bites in here after I give them a quick toss. I'm not going to do all of them at one time because I want them to get a good sear off on them. So we're just going to coat them right here. Beautiful. And now I'm going to place them right in our skillet. You can kind of hear them searing off. And this is over about, I've got it on to like close to a 7. So a medium high, but not a true high, because again, we are using butter.
You have a question? Can you go over what a focaccia is?
It is, so you can either do a yeast or a sourdough one, but it is a type of bread that you coat in oil. And then when you dimple it down, it gives them these nice ridges that get nice and crispy. So it is a thinner kind of chunk of bread that it has a really chewy outside, like a chewy, crispy outside, but a really soft and fluffy inside. And they're just delicious. You can do them both sweet or savory. I've done like cinnamon roll focaccia, like an apple spice focaccia. There's blueberry and lemon focaccia, and then you can do it savory in so many ways on there. You can even add cheese on there to add just like an extra bit of flavor too. Okay, I've got my first round of our steak on here. We will flip this each over in just a minute or so. We just want to quick kind of sear it off. But while we're waiting, let's get our asparagus going. I'm going to add in a little bit of olive oil over here, about a tablespoon. And we'll have that start warming up. I'm going to heat it over like a medium heat. And I've got my asparagus this week are like trees. My favorite asparagus are the really thin ones because I feel like you get more of it, but these were on sale, so we got them there. With asparagus, you need to cut off at least a minimum a bottom inch, sometimes more of the bottom stump of it, because this is going to be really dry and fibrous and it'll just like kind of shred apart in your mouth and is not very good. So don't feel like you are wasting any of your asparagus. This part that you're cutting off is dried out and not very good. I swear some of these asparagus are huge. Typically, a good indicator is if you kind of see like the white kind of fraying fibrous parts, that's when you know you need to cut it off there. But you can see if you look at them how dried out they are from being cut. That's why you want to make sure you cut them off, because is not good. Think about chewing on a stick. That's what those insides, if you leave them on, you'll have tender asparagus everywhere else, but then you get to that end and you're just chewing. There we go. We'll get our last little bunch here. These are, again, I swear, I think this is like a 100-year-old asparagus. It's so thick. Okay. We've got our oil there for our asparagus, so I'm going to drop these in. We'll kind of coat them real quick. Just going to roll it back and forth, and then I'm going to flip our steak. I've kind of got already an idea that they're ready because you can see they're starting to get a little bit of like a browning coming up. So we'll flip them over and just look at these beautiful kind of crispy edges on there. And now the second side is going to cook a lot faster than the first side because, again, we don't want to overcook these. If you cook them to what you want, but I like mine as a nice medium rare. So they're only going to be on this other side for just, 30 seconds or so to a minute in my cooking time. And then we'll take them out. So just enough to get rid of that pink coloring on the outside, but I still want them to be nice and pink on the inside because, again, I want a nice, juicy, medium rare. So I'm going to grab a plate here. That way I can start getting our steak bites off here in just a second. Let me grab some tongs real quick, and I'm going to toss my asparagus that I have over here in my oil, and then I'm going to get a lid on these in just a second, but I want to make sure I have them coated up because we will do like a steam fry. So we'll have our lid on it that will kind of steam them in their natural moisture, and then we'll put it on there. But let's get these guys out. Beautiful. Again, I want them to be nice and pink in the middle, because knowing that these are going to continue to cook on my plate. So removing them from the heat stops the immediate heat going there, but that residual heat in there is going to continue to cook them. They're small bites, which means they're going to cook up much faster than if you were doing either bigger bites or a full-size steak. You just don't want to overcook them, because then you'll be sad. So round one of our steak bites. And after about 5 minutes, they would be at a perfect medium rare on the inside. We're going to put our next round in here. I always like to put down, if I see any bigger fat pieces, I put that down so it has a chance to crisp up first, because that second searing does a lot faster.
Do you have a question? Did you say you're doing a gumbo night this week?
I am going to do a gumbo night. I picked up some okra. I'm just going to do a simple, like a shrimp gumbo, but I have okra in there, and so I'm gonna do a gumbo as a soup. I might do it. I don't know if I'll do it for dinner. I'd probably do it for a lunch, because my kids aren't as big of a fan as gumbo. But lunchtime, I get a little bit more creative, because my kids don't always eat my lunch. They're at school, so they don't eat it half the time. Although they come home from school and they're always like today, Torrin was like, "Ooh, can I have some of your wrap, Mom?" And so he ended up eating most of my wrap, and then Lena had my other half of my wrap, but I still had a big bowl of our soup, so I was content. My son, Torrin, he ate all the ravioli out of the soup and the meatballs, and I'm like, gotta eat the veggies too. Let me grab my lid. We can start steaming our asparagus in here. And this one, they get this nice vibrant color. That's when we're going to know that they're ready for like finishing them. But they take about 5 to 10 minutes on there. Okay, let's get our green onions. Once our little steak bites are cooked off here, I'm going to start making our Parmesan cream sauce. But we're going to add in our Parmesan cream sauce, we're going to add, of course, more butter, more garlic, and then we'll have cream, Parmesan, and some garlic salt, some more spices. More and more and more deliciousness. But this is going to be a sauce that has lots of flavor, that is going to flavor the asparagus and the rice, as well as the little meat bites. So you want to make sure you hit them all on there. Flip that guy over. So we've got our little steak bites here. Beautiful. I can tell once you start to see, like, get a nice little sear on it, we'll flip it over. Beautiful. And then, of course, we'll also have this with our focaccia, a nice good hunk of it, which I think will also be delicious. I'm a big fan of if I can dip my bread into anything. And I always feel like focaccia is kind of like, the way I cut it is in nice strips. It's kind of like almost like a breadstick. So I will probably dip it in my Parmesan cream sauce as well, because why not? Here we go. Let's get these guys all flipped over. And again, I'm cooking my meat over here on about a 6-7. So it's like a high medium, but I don't want to go too high. If I'm cooking, like searing off in oil, you can go higher. But with butter and with the garlic in there, I don't want it to burn as much as just to get caramelized in there and kind of crispy, but not burnt. So keep it a little bit lower on here. Okay. We'll let those kind of cook there. Let me get my little meat spatula out of the way. Or meat, one more, and then we'll give our asparagus a little bit of a pop up here. You can see so if I pull one from the bottom, you can see the color difference. This is a lot more vibrant. in color than these ones on the top. So we're going to kind of put them there. That vibrant green, once it gets really bright and darker colored, that's going to let you know that it's going to be tender, but still at that nice firmness, like a tender crisp, which is what I look for. If they're still pale white or palish green in there, that means they're still going to be really firm and not cooked all the way through yet.
So you have a question? For the meat, about how many minutes per side, or when do you know to flip?
I know more to flip is based on the first side. It's based on kind of the look. You'll start to see a little bit of the brown coming up on the sides, and that's when you're going to know when to flip. On the second side, it goes a lot faster, but I will often take one and check and see like a quick, and if it has a sear on it. Since these are small bits, I'm cooking them to, when I take them off, they're right before medium rare, but once they sit for about 5 minutes, they'll be at a medium rare. Now, I'm assuming my plate will have some left over because the cameraman keeps eating the steak bites on there. Now he has to wait. Are they good? Are they cooked perfectly? Good. But you, again, if you like more of a medium, you can cook them a little bit longer. You can also do them by feel. The rarer they are, the squishier they're going to be. Now, the more done they are, the firmer they're going to be. But these look just about done. When I cut into them, they should still be kind of a reddish pink inside. And as they sit for this remainder, they will continue cooking all the way through to a nice medium rare, which is that nice pink on the inside. And what's nice is we're going to have all of this residual little drippings in here is going to help us make a beautiful sauce. There we go. Get these. I'm going to turn this down really low right now because I don't want any of it to crisp up and burn before I have all of these little bits off. And resting your meat, so cooking your meat to just under being perfect, is going to allow them to be perfect once they've done their rest, which is letting your meat sit for a few minutes so that they can keep their juices in, but cool down, but continue cooking slowly without going over the top. Okay, let's give this a quick toss. Our asparagus is looking good. And our focaccia has about 2 minutes left, guys. So let's make our sauce here. I'm going to add in our garlic right now. We're going to let this toast up for a second. Then we're going to add in the rest of our butter. And then we've got to grate some Parmesan cheese, add in our cream, but make it delicious. So this is the sauce that's going to cover everything. So I want to make sure we have a good amount of butter. So we're adding the rest of that butter in there for this. There we go. We've got this down to about a 4. I'm going to do this remainder without, because they've all reached a kind of nice green color, without it on so that I can get a lovely, as it runs away, I was going to show you, a lovely pan sear on it. So a nice saute on there without continuing to cook them because I don't want them to get overcooked where they get mushy. Okay, let me grab. Let me actually use my, we're going to take my butter here with our things. We want all of those drippings in there from the meat. We've got our new garlic in there, which will continue to saute up and bring even more flavor into our sauce. And that's going to give you an even more fresh garlic flavor. And I like to do it both times because the old one gets nice caramelized, which is kind of a sweeter, but this is going to give you that more of that little kind of that zesty garlic flavor. There we go. And again, don't cook it too high. I'm moving mine up to about a 4, but you want to be careful so that you don't scorch or burn your garlic. There we go. Now, while we're melting, I'm going to add a little bit of garlic salt in here right now. We want about a teaspoon. We might add a little bit more, but I want them to kind of hit into the butter and kind of infuse it. We're going to add a little bit of onion powder. Here we go. That's going to give this nice flavor to it. And then we're going to go grab our focaccia out of the oven here. I'm going to leave it. I don't want to leave it too long. Let me turn that down. Beautiful. And we're going to go grab our focaccia, which is nice and ready. So we had this baking at 425. And look at this gorgeous, beautiful. There we go. We've got this nice line fondant. Let me give it a feel. I want to see if yep, it's got that nice hard crust on it, but that good soft flaky on the inside. We'll let this sit right here. Cool. Now, if you like this is a sourdough loaf, so if you like a crunchier one, you can cook it a little bit longer. But with sourdough, I tend to like a blonder bake on it. Same with my loaves when I bake up my loaves, so that it doesn't get too crunchy. It stays more of a nice, tender, chewy sourdough. Okay, we've got our butter in here. We've got our garlic, salt, and our onion powder. I'm going to sprinkle a little bit over our asparagus, some onion powder. Not too much because we're going to be putting our sauce on it, but I do like to make sure the asparagus can be eaten by itself too, not just with the sauce. We'll let that steam up and hydrate. We're going to add in our butter here. Not our butter, our cream. We're going to add, because this is a cream-based sauce, we're probably going to add about a half a cup with our butter. And I'm going to mix it in here, and these tasty little bits of that steak, and it's going to add such a great flavor to it. I'm going to grab my little whisk out here so that I can incorporate it a little bit better. And then once we add our Parmesan cheese in here, it's really going to kind of come together. Let's add a smidge more. But no flour or anything to thicken it up. You're going to just thicken it by kind of reducing the natural liquid in the cream and the Parmesan cheese. Let's give this a good toss. Looking beautiful. Okay. So I'm going to turn these down to my lowest setting so they can kind of sit for the final part. But they are just about done, and we are just about done. Let's get our sauce going up. I'm going to get my Parmesan cheese, and we're going to start to grate it over here.
I have a question. Can you use different cheese?
You can use a different cheese. The flavors will change, as well as the consistency. Some cheese are going to, won't incorporate in as well. So you just have to make sure you have a good cheese that's going to melt in there instead of just kind of glob together. So I'm going to use some freshly grated Parmesan, but you can also use pre-shredded if you want. Let me do it this way. We're going to add it in here. This is going to help kind of thicken up the sauce just a little bit. Let me turn it down since we've got a nice simmer on it. But it shouldn't need that much help thickening it, and we don't need it to be a super thick sauce. It doesn't need to be a gravy, but you want enough to be able to drizzle this over your rice and your steak bites and everything to make it just delicious. So we're going to grate this in here. Here we go. And I will say, don't use the powdered form of Parmesan cheese, like the ones that you get in the pasta aisle. Don't use that. That's just going to give you a really gritty texture to your pasta. My kids love that stuff, but I'm always like, I don't think this is real. Okay, let's mix this in. There we go. You can already see. And then, of course, you can always add some more, but we've got a nice kind of, look at that beautiful little Parmesan cheese kind of pulls in here. And last but definitely not least, we'll add in our green onions. And now I'm going to turn it off the heat so that it doesn't continue to cooking there, but we've got our nice sauce. And let me check our rice, but it should be nice and done. Beautiful. nice fluffy. Now the trick with the rice, treat it like you would quinoa. Fluff it with a fork. Don't stir it with a spoon. A spoon is going to mash it together, make it less fluffy. Just toss it with a fork and that's going to give you a fluffier one. Okay, let me grab a plate and we can serve up our dinner. Okay, I'm going to grab my focaccia over here. Grab my bread knife so we can cut it. Let's see if I can get it off the pan. A little hot, but not too bad. Okay. This is always the tricky part because I don't put parchment paper in there because I want it to come off. Let me grab my spatula because I want it to have a nice crunchy edge on it. The parchment paper will give you a chewier soft edge. There we go. I just need to lift it up with my spatula first. And then I can show you why it's so much better. If you can see as I'm flipping it up here, these nice little golden edges on it. It just needs a little love. There we go. But look at this. You get these nice kind of crispy golden edges. Still a little toasty warm. Okay. I'll get a nice little cut here. And you're going to see the sourdough bubbles in it, but nice and soft. Okay. We're going to serve that on our bread for dinner tonight. So we have our sourdough focaccia that we made with our fresh herbs, oregano, or thyme, rosemary, and green onions. And we added garlic, salt, and black pepper. And again, made with all of our sourdough discard or starter. And then we're going to make a bed of rice here for our things. Make sure you use a fork so you can get it nice and fluffy. Then we're going to add our steak bites on here. So you're going to top these right on top. These are what we pan seared off. I'm going to add them right on top of our rice so that we can drizzle over our Parmesan cream sauce in just a second. But we're going to add our asparagus first because I want that to be on my sauce on there both. And then we're going to finish off with our delicious Parmesan cream sauce that we made using the drippings from searing off our steak. And then we added our garlic, Parmesan cream, and then of course, salt and pepper, but delicious. Adds so much flavor to both the meat and the rice. Just makes it delicious. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of our recipes at home, you can just go to our link and search for what we make. And you can always watch and cook along with us again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront. My husband is trying to steal steak bites but on there that has our pans, our pots, our knives, all the different cooking gadgets that we use in the kitchen. I have there for everyone to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe.